So, Map, Miss Anthropony, did a video overlooking the season 10 portion of the IDW My Little Pony Friendship is Magic comic. And Map, we'll be honest, or I'll be honest with you, and I think a lot of us would agree with this, is very opinionated. And I think, and I say this with all due respect, no offense, all due respect, no offense, I think a lot of Map's colleagues, fellow analysts, if you will, would agree with that, because he's not afraid to tell it like it is. Especially when it comes to something he feels is, unnecessary, doesn't make sense, is contradicting, stuff like that. And when it came to the Gen 5 movie, of course, he was very opinionated on that. He basically felt like this just didn't make any sense. He could see, obviously he could see the potential, right? Like a lot of us, he could see the potential. But he just felt like it just didn't make any sense. What's going on here? What happened? He was asking the questions that a lot of us hope to have answered when the series comes out, if not the 44-minute follow-up, that occurs later this year as well. But, along with the other 44-minute follow-ups, 44-minute specials they have planned in the future, along with the series next year. But like I said, he was asking the questions, he was pointing out things, and everybody has, as I say a lot in my videos, everybody has a right to their opinions, and the same goes for Map. One person responded to him by basically commentating over his review, and when they would hear him point out something, they would pause the video and they would counteract, whatever you want to call it, what he was saying. For example, Map brought up the whole early leaks that we got of what the main six would have looked like in the original G5 plans, and this other fan that responded to him, basically said, well, you don't know whether or not, none of us do, whether or not these leaks, as they were called, were real or not, because it could have been fan made of what they potentially see, potentially see what the characters would look like. And again, like Map, this person has a right to their opinion too, because they might be right. None of us, let's be honest, did take into consideration that these leaks of what the main six would look like in the original plans for G5 were real or not. That they might have just been concepts by fans of what they feel they could look like and what changes could be made. Map, was very opinionated when it came to the movie, and this fan, called him out for a lot of it in their own way, called him out for certain things that, he felt he was getting wrong because he wasn't seeing the bigger picture. And then Map recently did a video, like I said, on the season 10 comic. And he basically explained that even though season 9 ended in a very well-meaning manner, in other words, basically a manner that and that was just my dog. She's just waking up right now. She's fine. She's got allergies. But anyway, like I said, he said that season 9 ended on a good note, basically on a well-meaning good note. Everything was resolved. Everything was fine. We didn't need, anything else to be added on to it. Now, he did say that if they wanted to continue it, that the best scenario was to do it in a way that would allow us to look into what the characters, are doing right now. In other words, see how they're basically, spending their lives now that they no longer have to worry about any threats, if you will, to Equestria. And, that does sound like it's a good idea and everything, but the one thing that Map seems to not understand as to why season 10 was done the way it was, instead of going in a direction that, as he mentioned, would have made more sense. Let's take a look at how the characters are doing and everything, and see how they're living their lives, living out their dreams, stuff like that. Let's let's see how the student 6 are doing. Let's see how this character's doing, that character's doing. Even though that's a great idea and should have been a great idea that should have been realized, I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that. The direction though they went with season 10 was different, and everything, because it allowed us to see the other characters interact, see what different diverse character groups could be like once they were teamed together. And the one thing that Map brought up about the whole comic situation was the inconsistency and the confusion, because he brought up the fact that before this the comic was like its own thing, like it would have elements of the show brought in, or elements in the comic would be put into the show and whatever, but they would stay their own separate continuity. But he brought up a lot of things that just didn't make sense, like the whole Tree of Harmonies being all over the world besides Equestria. And it's like what's this about? This doesn't make sense. I mean, we know about one Tree of Harmony that was planted by the Pillars, but where did these other ones come from? And then he brings up the fact that the explanation for them were given to us in 2 to 3 pages in the last 2 issues of the story. And yeah, that is a problem. I will admit that is a problem, that all of a sudden you bring these Trees of Harmony that come out of nowhere, and you basically say that, hey, these have been here the whole time, but we're just talking about them now, in these other regions of the world inhabited by other creatures besides ponies. Yeah, it does seem, I will admit it does seem confusing, and a little like something that got pulled out of the idea hat randomly of something to work on and explore. So I do agree that didn't make any sense, but but again, here's the thing that Map seems to, and this is what I was trying to talk about earlier. Here's what Map seems to not understand. It's about communication. Yes, the writing team for the comics are a different writing team than what on the show. And that writing team probably didn't get the notes as much as they should have, that things were resolved a certain way. Like, certain things were resolved and talked about, already in the show, like the Tree of Harmony and its origins, already taken care of. You don't have to deal with that. This was taken care of, that was taken care of. Which, which again is something that, if you're going to continue something in a different form of media, you have to make sure that the people that are going to continue it for you have all the notes. And, he does bring up a point that basically, adding in these Trees of Harmony, just didn't, like I said, they didn't make sense. But again, that's all about the lack of communication. And who knows, maybe this was a story that they already had planned out. They just weren't anticipating that, hey, we're going to take on the mantle of, hey, we're going to continue the animated series but in comic book form. That being the people at IDW. They probably weren't ready for that, so they probably realized, okay, we got to fix things up, we got to change some things, and boom, here we go, season 10. And maybe they did know. Maybe they did know that they were going to take on the mantle. But some of the stories, like I said, that they were already penning out and writing, maybe they meant for them to be, just part of the comic books canon, and now they have to readjust them for, for being basically the cartoon canon. We don't know. We don't really know. But, yeah, to me, it's about a lack of communication. Like, maybe they did know, but they weren't given all the notes, that were needed. Like, they were given notes about Scootaloo's parents and her aunts. Scootaloo's parents and her aunts. That was a good thing, so that the, art direction of the characters can remain consistent with the show. That's good. They were given notes on basically the relationship with Pinky and Cheese Sandwich, and they did it in a way, bringing them together in a way that, made sense, especially for them. They were obviously given notes on, Marble Pie and everything, and the fact that one thing fans always wanted to see is her finally speak and be more expressive than being, just Fluttershy 2.0, and, that's what we got. The thing is, the thing is, they did get some, some notes here and there, but not all of them. They didn't get all of them, that were needed. Like, again, with the Tree of Harmony deal, I will agree. That's something that they should have been able to, been told about. They should have been able to be told about out in a meeting, like, oh, what do you got planned for future stories as far as the comic goes, that you'll have to, like what I'm trying to say is, like, in a meeting, what they should have done is they should have talked with them. They should have gone back and forth, Zoom calls, whatever, video chats, and ask, okay, what do you have planned right now as far as just the comic itself goes? And if they would have said, well, we got this Tree of Harmony thing going on and everything, honestly, the people on the other side, the writers for the show, they should have came out and said, oh yeah, speaking of Tree of Harmony, we already did that, so you might want to change that up, do something different. But obviously they didn't do that. They didn't do that, so we ended up getting what we did. We ended up getting what they did. And I'll admit, the stories, like I said, with Pinky and Cheese Sandwich and Marble and even Celestia and Luna, I'll say this: these are stories that they could have done at the beginning of the season 10 run, and then lead us into that Tree of Harmony kind of deal with the other characters. So I'll agree that that's something that should have been rectified and changed up a little bit in order, from an order continuity standpoint, because it would have made more sense, and you wouldn't have had any interruptions. I mean, it's like you have Pinky on a journey to this land in one issue, or one issue or so, and then in the next issue or so, she's back in Ponyville. It's like, how did that happen? So I agree that continuity-wise, those issues with Pinky and Cheese and Celestia and Luna, they should have been swapped. I will admit that. At least to being the first issues. Now, again, like I said, I get where Map is coming from, when he looks at, the comic, and he feels like, it's not necessary. That he feels he feels like basically it's a mess. It's a mess that, is not necessary. It's not needed. And I don't know what that sound was. I don't know if that was me or something. But he basically feels like, the season 10 comic, like I said, was a mess. It was not needed. It was convoluted. And it basically, in his opinion, contracted the continuity difference between both, the show and the comic. Because, like I said, both the show and the comic were meant to be their own separate deal, with a few things, brought in from the comic to the show and vice versa. And, the reason he brings this up as to why they're, it basically, basically confuses the consistency, or basically, destroys, basically hurts, both being their own continuity, basically confuses and convolutes that, is due to the fact that, there's an image of Cosmos in one of the issues of the comic. I think it's one of the first story arcs of the Tree of Harmony deal, of the various Trees of Harmony deal, this final arc of the series overall. You have this, or one of the final story arcs anyway, you have this picture on a panel, on a pillar, in one of the caverns that, Zecora and her friends are exploring, along with Applejack and them. And you see this picture of Cosmos, a Draconis, character that they just faced in a story. And to him, that's confusing, because it's like Cosmos is supposed to be her own thing. She's not supposed to be, part of the continuity of the cartoon, which is season 10 deal is, supposed to be. The season 10, run of the comic is supposed to be. And yet here she is in this image. And to him, that convolutes and confuses, the different continuities between the two, because he feels now it's basically saying, or the writers are basically saying, that both the continuities of the comic and the cartoon were one and the same. That Cosmos, showing up in the comic, is part of the continuity of the cartoon. And that everything that happened in the cartoon is in continuity with the continuity of the comic. Basically, like I said, he feels that all this did was, basically, the writers saying, yeah, let's make both of them just one and the same continuity. And and basically a lot of the stories they've seen in the comics have been like their own side adventures and stuff like that. And again, I understand where he's come, and again, I understand where he or anybody else is coming from when you look at it like that, from that perspective, that it does seem convoluted, it does seem confusing, it does feel like the writers are merging basically both continuities into one, and not realizing that that's not what you're supposed to do. That what this season 10 run of the comic is supposed to be its own separate thing, arraying for the main continuity of the comic. Like this season 10 run is supposed to continue the continuity of the cartoon and not be tied in whatsoever. But obviously, again, a lack of communication, or maybe they just felt, hey, these are the final issues of the main IDW comic run. Let's just go balls to the wall and say, hey, this has all been between both it and the cartoon. They've all been one in the same as far as continuity is concerned. And if that's the case, then maybe they should have put some notes out at the beginning or at the end of the issue saying, oh, by the way, this basically the stories. So it's early, like I said, it's about 8:11, so I do apologize if I'm stumbling on my words and all that. But they should have at least put like a notes between, at the beginning or at the end of the story, saying that, oh, by the way, both continuities, in the comic and in the cartoon, have always been the same continuity. They should have at least alluded to that in some perspective, so that when people would continue reading, they'd be like, oh, so all this that happened in the comic basically is in the same continuity as the cartoon, or something like that. Because, he questioned a lot of stuff when he saw that image. He's like, well, wait a minute. So if Cosmos is in continuity with the cartoon, does that mean the Mirrorverse is in continuity? Does that mean the good Sombra with, the Sombra being the way he was originally and then being redeemed and all that is in continuity with the show, even though the show rectified that? He had a lot of questions. He had a lot of questions as to that one little image that was shown. Now, what's interesting though, when you look at the less confusing part of it, if you don't basically consider, okay, Cosmo's image showing up there being, something that's alluding that both the continuities have been one and the same, both the cartoon and the comic. If you don't take that in consideration, then maybe you look at that as being an Easter egg. Like, hey, it's the comic staff throwing a little Easter egg in there saying, hey, we know we know that these issues of the comic are based on the continuity of the cartoon, but we're going to throw in an Easter egg here and there to remind you that this is an My Little Pony comic who originally was its own thing. Maybe that's what they did. We don't know. But yeah, he obviously didn't like the comics tone and everything, and he also didn't like the villains. He didn't like the villains being, basically the knights, assumingly the ones that planted the Tree of Harmony. He didn't like the fact that, they were the kind of villains that, although they beat the heck out of the main cast of characters in the stories so far, and even mind controlled 3 of them apparently, temporarily, that basically they were defeated easily. It's like all of a sudden here comes the Student 6, here comes the rest of the troops, just like at the end of the ending of the end in that big climactic battle, and they just get beat easily. They just get defeated easily, and that's that. So I can understand his frustrations with villains that just show up at out of nowhere at the end, give the exposition as to where these trees came from, as to why they're the way they are, and then they get defeated easily. I can understand his frustration with that, because if you're going to introduce villains that seemingly are a bigger threat than, basically Sombra, Tyrek, Chrysalis, and Cozy Glow, and several others before them combined, even the Storm King, if you're going to bring in these guys that are supposed to be a bigger threat, and they get defeated easily, yeah, I can understand the frustration, because you're not taking the time, in the issues, at least on the side, to build up to who these guys are, like showing silhouettes, hearing them speak and all that. You're not taking your time to build them up. So yeah, I can understand where he's coming from with that. I really do. But again, I think when you really look at this, I think it was a lack of communication. Like maybe these are stories they already had penned and ready to go, and then when they got the news that they were going to take that these issues were going to be now part of the animated continuity, thus season 10, they probably had to rewrite as best they could. Like they probably had certain issues and everything already written up and everything ready to go, and then they had to redraft it. They had to rewrite certain parts to tie in with it being part, to make it basically tie into being part of the animated continuity. That's my thing. And again, it's lack of communication. I get that. And I can also understand his frustration for the fact that once again, Discord is the reason that these nights are the way they are. Because just like he did in Last Problem, just like he did in the season 4 finale, just like he did in A Matter of Principles and stuff like that, he's been known to cause a lot of trouble. He's a troublemaker. And he should be, in that no matter how much you try to redeem him, he should be someone that gets basically the same treatment as the villains in the finale of, or at least part of the finale, the ending of the end part, that is, that they got, and that's being turned to stone. So yeah, I can understand his frustration with, again, Discord being, at the center of this whole situation, to where he's the one that caused this, or pretty much was the catalyst for causing this all to happen. But I need to remind you of something. And I know it may sound like an excuse to a lot of people, but did we not forget, analysts, reviewers or not, bronies, Pegasisters or not, or just fans, did we not forget that Discord is the Lord of Chaos? Did we not forget that? Because if we did, need I remind you, he's the Lord of Chaos. And by his own admission, he needs to have chaos to be able to thrive in and out of his dimension. Which is why he, even though he had good intentions, which is which is why he did what he did in the finale, in the ending of the end. Which is why he did what he did, here in the season 10 story arc with the Tree of Harmony, or the Trees of Harmony, I should say. He's basically someone that needs chaos to thrive. Like I said, in and out of his dimension, and it makes him more powerful. It gives him more longevity, even though he's immortal, than he probably needs anyway. So I think that's one thing a lot of people seem to forget. He's the Lord of Chaos, so causing chaos, even though he might have good intentions or not, or causing chaos when he's a villain, that's just his thing. That's because that's who he is. That's what I'm trying to say. So, I think that's what Map seems to forget, and I think that's what a lot of people seem to forget. He's the Lord of Chaos, and any lord in any fiction that is the Lord of this or that, they have to have something that relates to it. And thus, having something that relates to it makes him stronger. And being the Lord of Chaos, he has to have chaos. He has to have a bit of chaos to help him thrive, help him keep him around, if you know what I mean. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think it makes a lot of sense in the long run. I really do. But again, I get where he's coming from when it comes to the comic. Like, it just doesn't make sense about certain things. And I can understand his frustration with the fact that, they hit the 100th issue, and instead of doing a big celebration, it's just a continuation. And that's just my dog. She's sneezing. Like I said, she's got allergies. But again, I can understand his frustration with the 100th issue, that instead of being a big 48-page special celebration, it's just continuing the story arc of the Tree of Harmony deal with all these separate groups. And again, I totally get where he's coming from. I totally do. But like I said, I think when you really get down to it, it's a lack of communication. I mean, the stories that they gave us in the Tree of Harmony, the stories I thought were good. Even the side stories, despite them, in my opinion, should have been, at the beginning of the season 10 run before we went into the story arc. I thought they were good too. But I think, honestly, despite some of the notes they got, if you will, some of the notes they got, which were more recent from like season 9 and everything, with the parents and the aunts for Scootaloo, because that's when we got them, basically from the Last Crusade, as well as the whole Pinky cheese sandwich deal continuing on and blossoming into something more now. As far as the other notes, like the Tree of Harmony deal and everything, I don't think they got those notes. And if they did, they didn't get the notes they needed to rectify what they were doing, because they probably already had them planned out, and they're like, okay, well, how can we make this work, in our favor, to basically, make it feel like it's part of the animated continuity, although we had other plans. And to me, I think they did the best they could. I really do. I think they did the best they could. They probably had a different opening prepared for that Tree of Harmony deal, but then they decided, you know what, we can rework this and make it be Twilight's first big order or assignment given as ruler of Equestria along with her friends. And again, when you really think about it, and when you think about it, what the writers did here, just like with any comic book based on something does, is they took the characters that don't get really a lot of time and they gave them opportunities. They gave them time. You put Rainbow Dash in charge of a group that has, I think, had Lyra and Bonbon, I think, in there, along with Captain Sorrello and Spitfire. Then you put Pinky and Rarity together, and all that with the Diamond Dogs, and they did a good job in giving some characters that we had not seen talk or speak since the movie, except for like prequels and all that. We actually seen them in the we actually saw them, like I said, in the finale. I should correct myself there. We saw them in the finale, but we never saw them really speak that much until later on. Tempest Shadow being the exception. But I thought they did a good job incorporating the characters in what I think probably was a different different plans for the story than what we got, because like I said, I think because of the fact that they didn't get the notes from the previous seasons, like of the Tree of Harmony and all that, that is why we didn't get a different kind of story or anything, or a different kind of story or anything to kick season 10 off with, or really a different kind of story arc to kick season 10 off with, because of the fact that, well, basically it was probably something different than original. And that's the only thing I can assume. And the only notes they got were the more recent ones from the last season. And that's why, things seem to be more consistent when it came to the storyline with Scootaloo, which again is another storyline that I think that should have, been released at the beginning of the run, as well as the storyline that we got with Celestia and Luna, and the storyline that we got with, Pinky and Cheese Sandwich. So, I think that's the only consistency you got, because everything else, I feel, was originally meant to be part of the comic books continuity, but when they got word they were going to be part of season 10, as I mentioned earlier, or they were going to be the season 10 continuation of the animated show, they had to switch things up and do the best they could with what they had. So, again, I can understand where Miss Antoponi's coming from, anybody else is coming from, but to me, I think in the long run, it was a lack of communication. And this is why there are certain elements in season 10, this main story arc of season 10, that feel out of place. Because I think they were originally meant to be part of the comic books finale and not a continuation of the animated cartoon. But what do you guys think? Do you think maybe I'm grasping for straws? Do you think Map has a point? What are your thoughts? Comment down below, live chat during the premiere, like the video, check me out on BW Roses on Patreon, check me out at BW Roses Discussion on all your favorite audio podcast locations, except for Pandora. Check me out at BW Roses on Venmo, as well as check out my Teespring store, and check me out at my Venmo. I will try to link that down below as well. So until next time, guys, I will talk to y'all later.